Recording has been started.
Good morning, our viewers in United States, and good evening to our viewers and our presenter today based in India. We are here on a Saturday morning, 10 a.m. US time, for yet another monthly Council for Strategic Affairs Distinguished Lecture Series. My name is Dr. Adityanji, and I'm the President of Council for Strategic Affairs. The topic for today's lecture is Strategic Importance of Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the context of Indo-Pacific. So when you registered, you probably saw this brochure / flyer with picture of our distinguished speaker. A little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. Council for Strategic Affairs imparts education in the field of international relations. CSA fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. CSA encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. CSA condemns terrorism in any form worldwide, and CSA aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. We have a number of programs. We do a monthly roundtable discussion on second Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. Eastern Day Time. On fourth Saturday of the month or third Saturday of the month, we usually do a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert. CSA also organizes symposia, meetings, and conferences. CSA promotes publication of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. And CSA is organizing a summer internship program for college students. So as I said, our distinguished speaker today is Dr. Sanat Kaul. Dr. Sanat Kaul has a PhD from University of London. He is a retired IAS officer. He has served in the government of India in various states and union territories for 36 years in different capacities. He was also India's permanent representative to the Council of International Civil Organization, CICO, in Montreal in Quebec, Canada. He was also on the board of Air India and Airports Authority of India. He is currently founder chairman of International Foundation of Aviation, Aerospace and Drones, IFFAAD, which has branches in India, Canada, and I think it is going to have a branch in London also. He has been posted in Arunachal Pradesh at Anini near the Chinese border and also served as Deputy Secretary Political, reporting directly to the Chief Commissioner of Union Territory of Arunachal Pradesh from 73 to 75. He had insight into the geopolitical issues of our land borders. Thereafter, he was posted as Deputy Commissioner of Nicobar Islands of Groups from 1975 to 1977. This brought him personally in touch with the security issues of maritime domains pertaining to Bay of Bengal and Malacca Straits. Again, from 1991 to 1993, he was Chief Secretary of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, from where he was again looking into the issue of maritime security and strategic issues. Post his retirement, he wrote a book for the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis. That institution is nowadays called Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis. And the title of the book is very relevant to today's lecture. The title of that book was Andaman and Nicobar Islands, India's Untapped Strategic Assets. In his book, he has pointed out how India has overlooked its own island territories in the Bay of Bengal in its Act East policy. He has pointed out that these islands offer huge soft power and advantage to India if these islands are opened up to high-end tourism by directly connecting them to ASEAN countries. Therefore, in my mind, Dr. Sanat Kaul is the most eminent and most qualified person, expert to discuss strategic issues involving India's land and maritime borders, especially relating to Andaman and Nicobar Islands, where he served twice. Well, let's go. So the topic is strategic importance of Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the context of Indo-Pacific. Before he starts his lecture, I will just introduce. So this is Andaman and Nicobar Islands in Bay of Bengal. And here you have the map of Andaman and the Nicobar Islands. And here is Port Blair, the capital city. Why Andaman and Nicobar Islands are important strategically? Now they are, of course, center of an integrated tri-command structure. Andaman and Nicobar Islands have been called India's permanent aircraft carrier. It's a gateway to the Strait of Malacca, and it can be an additional choke point for South China Sea. So you see here Andaman and Nicobar Island, and this is the Strait of Malacca. And again, in red arrow, the Strait of Malacca, so narrow, and then being opening up to South China Sea or West Philippine Sea, whichever way you call it. So Andaman and Nicobar Islands have been called India's trump card, whatever it means, and it is location of the integrated tri-command structure. And of course, you know, what is the geopolitical situation in South China Sea and overall Indo-Pacific. So it is indeed India's strategic asset and India's trump card. A little bit about housekeeping rules before we start this presentation by Dr. Sanat Kaul. Please mute yourself to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone setting to vibration mode. Please do not try to interrupt our esteemed speaker. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to ask questions. Anyone who has joined anonymously will not be allowed to ask questions. All the questions have to be sent by chat function. We don't take direct questions. Please be very precise and specific in asking a question. And please do not send lengthy comments in the form of a monologue or a lecture. Finally, we are recording this event, and this would be available on our YouTube channel within 24 hours. So I will be inviting Dr. Sanat Kaul to start his lecture. He has a very fascinating presentation on PowerPoint. So as he speaks, I'll be running his PowerPoint presentation. So may I invite, without further ado, Dr. Sanat Kaul, whom I have known since 2006. And I must say that this presentation was scheduled for January of 2022, but he was traveling to London, UK for some family issues. So we decided to postpone it while he was back in India. So the floor is yours, sir. Dr. Sanat Kaul, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adityanji. Can I start with slide one, please?
Yes. Can people see the slide set deck?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, Dr. Kaul, please start.
So, what is the strategic importance of Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the context of Indo-Pacific? These islands came to India at the time of when the British were leaving at the time of partition. In fact, there was talk of these islands becoming part of Pakistan because East Pakistan was there that time, and there was also talk, unconfirmed, that some people had requested that they remain crown colonies. However, they joined the Indian Union and became a union territory. And the government of India followed a very policy which I call masterly inactivity and benign neglect. Because there was no money, there was very little to do. The tribals were very nice and simple. So they took everything as an easy target and they said, let the islands remain. So as I have just quoted India today, the placid waters of Andaman belie the 24/7 threat perception that churns these water on literary basis. There is no reason to believe that forces inimical to India's interests do not have designs on these islands to spy them, and many sensitive installations that their house straddled the busiest trade routes in the world. The onus of keeping it safe and sanitized is the responsibility of the Indian Navy. Now, these are about 570 islands and islets, of which 38 are about inhabited, rest are not inhabited. They are divided into two archipelagos. They are running from north, from Myanmar down all the way to the western entrance of the Malacca Straits. And they have been, as Dr. Adityanji had said, they have been called, they are as good as aircraft carriers. They're permanent aircraft carriers. There are four airstrips there, two in Andamans and two in Nicobars. In fact, let me also say that this was the only part of India still under Japanese occupation for 3.5 years during the Second World War. And Japanese have left these islands when they lost the war. They just left. Now, why these islands? Importance of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, the present day scenario, the Chinese encirclement of India are difficulties in the north and west. So this is the counter to it. Importance of Malacca Strait. There are about 10 sea lanes of communication. Channels like Malacca's. Malacca is about 900 kilometers, starting from Singapore with Phillip Strait, which is technically called Phillip Strait, and then Malacca Straits. And about 100,000 ships pass by every year. So, massive amount of oil and goods pass through these channels, this strait, and it's it's very important. So everybody realizes that these are important. India's EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone, which comes out of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, is about 1/3 of India's total EEZ. So that EEZ, which was part of the UNCLOS 2 negotiations, have been important. In fact, what I will bring out is that during the negotiations, India did not get the archipelagic status for Andaman and Nicobar Islands, whereas Philippines got it for the whole country. Now that's a very technical issue, and I don't want to go into it. But the result has been that between the Andaman and Nicobar Islands there is a 10-degree channel, and Chinese submarines have been found going through it. Not too good for India. Okay, next please. Now, for these, there has been a lot of effort at naval diplomacy over time, which I'll explain. And the Chinese have called Malacca Straits as the Malacca Dilemma. This has been mentioned by a former Prime Minister of China. And they have been looking for alternatives to Malacca Straits. During the Second World War, the Malacca Straits was closed because one Japanese ship had been bombed. So it's a very dangerous thing because China is so dependent on Malacca Straits for all their oil plus their exports and imports that it is very, very crucial to them. And I will explain later what they are doing about it. Now, India had a look east policy in 1991, and this was followed by an act east policy in 2014. But during these two policies, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands did not find any particular place. And as I said, the policy of benign neglect and masterly inactivity continued. Now, what do we need? Why do we need a strategic policy for these things? Because we need it because they are very crucial to the strategic requirements of India. We are having a lot of difficulty in the Himalayan side, both in northeast as well as the dark side. And then, of course, we have the Pakistan border. So this is one place where we are reasonably well off, secure, and the strategic challenge of taking care of the Bay of Bengal, at least, and the Malacca Strait is a challenge, is a rebuttal. Now, therefore, I've tried to explain the importance of these islands is very high. There are two archipelagos consisting of 572 islands and islets, and even rocks, and forming a chain. It's practically a chain. And these islands provide tremendous economic potential for tourism, fisheries, and 30% of the EEZ. Next, please. Next, please. Next. Now, what is happening in that area? The entire South China Sea is an area of turmoil, with Chinese nine dash lines and the differences between 4 or 5 of these ASEAN member countries and islands coming up in the South China Sea with airstrips and totally militarized islands is making the whole South China Sea very, very tense. Whereas what is happening in the Andaman Islands? Andaman Islands are very peaceful. Many reasons. One is that all the maritime boundaries have been tied up, except for with Pakistan. But I'm talking about Bay of Bengal area. All maritime boundaries have been tied up. There is no tension, and whatever was a tension point, like the issues between Myanmar and Bangladesh and India on maritime boundary, was settled by international arbitration. Take in contrast the Philippines example of what happened in South China Sea, where Philippines won the arbitration and yet China has not accepted that. Now, the issue of what to do with these islands. Now, if 38 islands are inhabited, and well, now there is a little more presence, but earlier there was hardly any presence of any military or navy or anything, especially in the Nicobar group. There we knew that people from Thailand and Myanmar would come fishing to our island, stay there. They were sometimes even hosted by the local tribals and go back. There's nothing wrong with it. Those who were caught were kept as prisoners in Port Blair, and then their governments were told to lift them, and they would be airlifted and taken back. But there was hardly any jurisdictional issues. The but uh, but what we need to do is now to make people aware that Andaman Nicobar Islands are part of India. Bay of Bengal jurisdiction is not is extends right up to Malacca Straits, and I will talk later about the Great Nicobar, which is another island where uh, a lot can be done. Now, this policy of benign neglect, masterly inactivity, and benign is shown by the fact that they never allowed, government of India never allowed a medical college to come up. It was all signed up, ready for in Port Blair. It was turned down, saying no, 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 let's not do it. Again, there was an MOU signed between the governor of Phuket and Lieutenant Governor of Andaman in 2005. No action. India never went to Phuket for the return visit, and they felt little upset. So, with this kind of activity, things in the Andaman Nicobar Islands has remained stagnant. There was nothing much that was done. The Indian Navy was very much present, and so was the Air Force. In fact, I will give a little anecdotal reference that when the Japanese occupied these islands, they built 2 airstrips in Nicobar and 1 airstrip in Port Blair. And when they left, the Royal Air Force took over one of the airfields, and they had in Nicobar, and they called it number 1 staging post. They continued to hold this airfield till about mid 50s, when they finally said that we are not going to use this anymore, we are leaving. They left everything behind, and finally the Indian Air Force took over. So there were issues of, I suppose, budget and other things, but the point was that the even the Port Blair, the naval station was understaffed and didn't have enough money. Therefore, these things now misuse of the islands by many people have taken place over time. The Arakan separators, the LTTE, foreigners like Myanmaris, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankan have settled there. Large scale poaching of fish as well as of sea cucumber. Sea cucumbers are banned in India, but Burmese poachers come and pick them up, and they're very expensive. So they make a lot of money. They even have permanent hideouts on the west coast of the island, which is facing the Indian Ocean, and where they keep their petrol and their fuel and other equipment. So that is another aspect. Now, what should be our role? What is the possibility? Now look at this. If you see, the Great Nicobar Island is on the tip up there, and then the Andaman Sea and the western entrance of Malacca Strait. So we are in a very positive position regarding Malacca Strait, provided we fortify our islands and have a naval presence there. Now, Great Nicobar Island is one sort of really out of the way place. When I was there was nothing there. The only thing that was done in 1960s was resettling 300 ex-servicemen families who were given land and some funds to start an agriculture. They were rather unhappy. In fact, they were not too happy. They didn't prosper very much. And that was the extent of India's strategic significance of Great Nicobar Island. But, well, things are changing now, and I will talk more about it. Next, please. Now, Malacca Strait is a 900-kilometer route, and its narrowest point is 11 miles. It's 11 to 12 miles in width, and in areas it's less than 30 meters deep at times. The alternates to Malacca Strait are Sunda Strait, 50 miles wide, but with strong currents, and the other is the Lombok Makassar Straits in Indonesia. Uh, both have their own limitations. So Malacca Strait remains the preferred international shipping route, with about 100,000 ships passing through it, going past Great Nicobar Island, and 40% of world trade passes through the straits, and about 25% of the world's oil. In value terms, uh, it carries a huge amount of things. Next, please. So the Chinese have referred Malacca Strait as the Malacca Dilemma. They feel very insecure that in a war-like scenario, these straits could be blocked. And this happened when, in the Second World War, a Japanese ship was sunk there. Chinese imports from Middle East are about 50% of the total economy and will become more, 75% by 2016. That is what I wrote then, but we don't know with COVID and all what's happening now. And it's a narrow strait, it's a dangerous strait, but it's very critical. So, what is China doing about it? They are looking to find alternatives to Malacca Strait. Next, please. Now, for us, Andaman Nicobar Islands provide a deep penetration into the Bay of Bengal and Andaman Sea. Great Nicobar Island is barely 80 kilometers from Sumatra. And should the needs arise, Indian Navy could use this proximity to control the western entrance. Now, that is where the critical thing lies. Can we do it or not? Next, please. Now, Malacca Patrol is another thing. The Malacca Strait was known for piracy earlier. Over time, it's been cleaned up. In 2004, a Malacca Patrol was established with four countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand, for the vital patrolling intelligence exchange to keep the passage safe and secure. And it is now reasonably secure. In view of our closeness to the western entrance of the strait due to the Great Nicobar Island, India has hinted at joining the Malacca Patrol, but this has not been agreed to. In fact, I think this is one thing which is desirable, and the Indian diplomacy should continue to request the four countries and Indonesia in particular, because there have been little objection from that side to do it, to keep requesting that we should join the Malacca Patrol. It will be in a feather in a cap if we are allowed to join the Malacca Patrol as a partner. Also, Indonesia has agreed to give India for development of a port of Sabang across the Great Nicobar Island. Now, South China Sea, I've already explained. All countries like Vietnam are making claims of sovereignty over Paracel and Spratly Islands, as well as over Mischief and Scarborough Shoal and other locations. Taiwan, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, and South China Sea are all upset with China. Vietnam has rejected the historical explanation and claims over these islands. Philippines has already taken China to the international arbitration and won, which they have not accepted. Next, please. Now, the other thing, which is one aspect of the Andaman Nicobar, is the issue of Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong was returned to China on completion of 99 years in 1990.
Dr. Kaul, we are not able to hear you.
On the contrary, can I continue?
We were not able to hear you, so I'm going to.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible now.
Okay.
I'm going back to the slide you were on.
Yeah. So I was talking of Hong Kong, that Hong Kong is an opportunity for India to invite Hong Kong businessmen by creating an ambience in the Great Nicobar Island, which is quite big. It has fresh water. There have been a lot of opposition to it by the environmentalists, because about 2/3 of the island has now been put under forest reserve. But even then, I think there is enough scope. Now, over time, now we have had with the US Indo-Pacific Strategy Report, we've had some more interesting developments. So, US is now pursuing in their policy report, I've quoted Indo-Pacific faces mounting challenges. Then there is Quad. Quad and Indo-Pacific report together form the new developments in the Indo-Pacific area where Andaman and Nicobar comes very handy, very important, and I think they're very useful if it is taken into account. Meanwhile, what is next, please? What are the alternatives to Malacca Strait for China? China is seeking alternatives. They realize that Malacca Strait may not be their preferred sea line of communication because they feel that it can get disrupted. So they have got two alternatives already done. One is the Gwadar port and the pipeline and road running all the way from Pakistan to Xinjiang, and the other is through Myanmar. They are also running the same thing, and they can take their fuel, their imported fuel, through the pipeline all the way up. So if there's a disruption, they can bypass it partially, but not fully because there's still a lot of shipping which is involved, which cannot be done through pipelines and through roads from there. So Malacca still is a dilemma, but it remains a problem for them. Next, please. Next. Oh, okay. Now I don't want to waste time on India's maritime legislative history, but over time we have two enactments. We have said our EEZ is so much, we have a permanent coast guard, we have a maritime act. So things that way have improved, and we now have 60,000 square kilometers of EEZ in this area out of the Andaman Nicobar Islands. It's come out. Now, one of the things which I had mentioned already is that India has very good amicable maritime boundary settlements with all its neighbors in the Bay of Bengal. So we are not having any tension, which is great, and we should maintain that. So all these things have been tied up, including Sri Lanka in 74 and 76, Indonesia in 19. So now China is another peculiar country where they have core interests, non-negotiable interests. They keep saying these things, and we don't know what they're going to do about Andaman Nicobar Islands tomorrow. So we should, in my view, occupy these islands to a much greater extent, but not occupation by putting people there because these are very highly sensitive, environmentally sensitive islands, but by encouraging international tourism of high quality, which the Supreme Court has also allowed. Supreme Court went through this environmental issue of Andaman Nicobar and said high value, low volume tourism should be encouraged. So the forest should be maintained, but high value, low volume tourism should be done. Other thing is about oil. Now, the entire Sumatra Strait has oil. I mean, Sumatra side of the Malacca Strait has oil, but we have not found oil. We have found some oil, we capped it, we don't find it viable to take it out. But I think there is a need for much greater uh, oil exploration in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and I'm sure we'll find some oil. Now, with US presence in South China Sea, this is not looked well by China and Chinese claim oversight. So this is the whole thing, the Japanese, Vietnam. But of late, what I've tried to say is that Japan in particular has been very keen on these islands. They know these islands well, and they have been allowed to do some grant work recently to develop some parts of these islands, which is a beginning. Now with ASEAN, they are having problems all the time. 5 out of 10 countries of ASEAN have maritime problem with China, and China Sea. They've been trying to build a code of conduct for South China Sea, which is not working out. China want to deal with the maritime border bilaterally with each country and not as ASEAN as a group. And all these things are happening there. So these have serious implications, and therefore our side of the Bay of Bengal has to be kept in the most peaceful manner, which we've managed so far, but should continue to be. That we have to make sure. Then there is rise of regionalism in Indo-Pacific, with ASEAN, BIMSTEC, Indian Ocean Rim. These are the things which India initiated, and they managed to do well. Next. Naval diplomacy has been going on for some time. There's a very interesting exercise called Milan, which is based in Port Blair. It happens every alternate year, and it's started in 2014, I think. And lots of navies come. China, of course, is not invited, but they come. This year, I don't know why, but they have been shifted to Visakhapatnam. I think they should continue with Port Blair as the place. Then the Malabar exercise, Simbex exercises, but these are all not connected directly with Andaman Islands. Next, please. Next, please. So, I have been advocating that there should be a strategic shift in India's defense policy on the look east and act east policy. It should be done by having a policy, a proactive policy for Andaman and Nicobar Islands. What do you want to do with these islands? Do you want them as a strategic point where you can project them? Now, these are historic islands. There is the cellular jail and so on, but the strategic importance of these islands should be leveraged now, and there is time to do it. Act East policy should not overlook importance of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and we need to have sufficient force by ourselves or with our partners to blockade Malacca Strait. That's very important. That the concept of blockade should not be given up. It should be kept under covers. In fact, Gurung Bhatt has raised this issue that in case of an unfortunate attack on even land and land grab by China, as it is happening, now we can blockade the western entrance. Now, can you do it or not? That's the question. But it's just a thought. It's just a thought which is being put across. So this is the Great Nicobar Island. Great Nicobar Island is a big island. It's about the size of Singapore. Over time, about 2/3 of the island has been made into forest reserves, but all you can see is that 1/3 is available. There is revenue land, and they offer a lot of strength. There is a proposal now to build a container shipment port in the Great Nicobar Island, which is the beginning of developing it. The Indian Navy also has a naval air base. It had an airfield by Coast Guard, I think, but now since 2012 they have had a naval air base called BAS, and they are extending. It was a small little airfield. It is getting extended. The other thing is Nankori Kamota Harbor in the Nicobar group is very, very deep and very good. That's where the Japanese kept their entire fleet. India has got a little naval contingent, but they have not really taken advantage of the location. The location is excellent. So next, please. Now, Freeport, previous slide. The Freeport concept of Great Nicobar Island, I think, is still attractive. In fact, what is happening is that the Hainan Island of China, where they keep the submarines on one end and they are creating a free port there now. After Hong Kong, they're spending massive amount and they're creating free port and a tourism tourism facility. So that is happening now. We have to think of Great Nicobar Island. That's how I look at it. It has potential and it should be done. And Niti Aayog is doing something for a holistic development of Great Nicobar Island, but not mention Freeport. China will go on and on having white papers and please skip this. So Mumbai attack of 2008 was by the sea. We can't now. We should think in terms of our coast guards and our navy guarding our not only mainland borders but the islands of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. We have a coast guard which has aircraft which does patrol, but we need more intensity and we need to look into it in a greater depth. Next, please. So Dr. Adityanji had mentioned that in our first Unified Air Command was set up in 2001. It is still going on. Whether it's been successful or not is an issue which there is a debate over it, but it's been set up as the first Unified Command, and it's a great thing to have one. Next. Now, there's a special environmental sensitivity with Andaman Islands. There's a Supreme Court judgment on this issue, and therefore we have to honor it. And it lays down very detailed guidelines of what we can do, what we can't do. We should follow it, but we should still have high value, low end tourism. Encourage direct flights from international locations to ensure to make people of Southeast Asia and internationally say that Bay of Bengal is part of India. It is they will go for holidays there, then they will realize that these are the islands which belong to India, and India's jurisdiction goes right up to the western end of the Malacca Straits. Next. And there is complementarity between tourism and security. I have always mentioned that tourism in small islands which are uninhabited can have security people there who will inform you of any violations of any untoward happening there. It'll be a signpost. Otherwise, many of these islands remain without security, and we don't even know who are coming, who are going. Fishermen, if they can come and steal cucumbers, sea cucumbers from an island and leave their petrol behind in some bush, it's a dangerous thing. Anybody else can do it too. So that's one danger. So there is unfortunately a clash between environment and security, and which somebody should settle down. It's not a question of we have to go along with the environment, but bring in security also. So my contention is finally that we need a hard power, but we also need a good soft power for Andaman Nicobar Island, which will make everybody realize that not only is these islands strategically critical, but they are also part of India where you can go for holidays, they have high quality resorts, and they will realize that, oh, India is right up to Malacca Strait. So that is how I wanted to end my lecture. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Sanat Kaul. Very educative, very fascinating lecture on Andaman Nicobar Islands, their strategic importance, especially in the run up to Indo-Pacific, because this century is going to be the century of Indo-Pacific. So you have really made a very good case for, using these untapped assets for tourism, marine, harvesting, and harvesting other resources besides the strategic, potential, uh, and leveraging that against an adversary that can hurt us on the land border in Arunachal Pradesh. So I am actually very happy that we were able to get you finally to deliver this lecture. As I said originally that it was scheduled for month of January, but we are very lucky. And now we want to move on to question and answers. But before I open it to question and answers, we have Commodore Watson. Uh, Commodore Watson, do you want to say a few words? Kindly unmute yourself, sir. Commodore Watson, we cannot hear you. Can you please unmute yourself?
He's unmuted, but I think there is some problem. He having some headphones and all those, so he has to take either headphone or put on the headphone properly.
Commodore Watson, we are still not able to hear you. No. Okay. Well, we will try Commodore Watson later on because we can't hear him. So I will start reading some of the comments from the chat function. There is a question here by Sunil B. Thanking Dr. Kaul for very enlightening presentation, and then saying you did not mention anything or compare with India's western islands, Lakshadweep, your assessment of these western islands.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. I did not mention there are because these are two different sets. This is with Indo-Pacific. The Western Islands have their own importance, but I am not discussing Western Islands in this presentation specifically and purposely because the value of the Andaman Nicobar Islands is related to the Indo-Pacific, the Malacca Strait, and why we need to reinforce it. That's why I have not mentioned. Those islands have their own relevance and they can have a separate lecture on it. There is no commonality between the two from strategic side. That's how I look at it.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kaul. We'll see if Commodore Watson can try again. Commodore Watson? No, we are not able to hear you.
Now we can hear you, right?
Now we can hear you. Please go ahead.
No.
No, it's not right. Commodore Watson is not right. I have here Dr. Rakesh Sharma raising his hand. Dr. Rakesh Sharma, please go ahead. Dr. Rakesh Sharma.
Yes. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Kaul and rest of the panel. Glad to be here. I have I have more commercial question as compared to defense or the importance of islands for defensive purposes. If as a layman, I'm looking at India's strategy to make money, you can see that India has done very poorly in the last 20, 30 years to attract tourism. India attracts roughly 15 million tourists a year, and I can bet you out of those 15 million, half are NRIs.
Dr. Sharma, please be specific. He has already gone through,
Yeah.
soft power and tourism. So please ask a specific question.
Yeah. So China, on the other hand, has 10 times more. So it's the government of India which is responsible for not working on this commercial aspect. Why not put pressure on them to develop Andaman and Nicobar just for tourist purposes and make some money?
Dr. Kaul, please.
Yeah,
Any comments?
yeah. So I fully agree with you, and I linked up with Andaman Nicobar as a soft power. Soft power is something which you project that up to the right, and therefore you must have international flight. There are four airlines there. Not a single one is getting international. The international airport, Port Blair was declared international airport about 10 years back. For whatever reason, we don't know. They are either there or they are not able to come, because I know that the board of business associations of Port Blair have actually been to Thailand and other places to invite them, but somehow they're not coming. So there is a very interesting and study to be done of why we are not opening these islands, why even the private capital, hotel capital, is not really coming into the island. Now they're coming into one or two places because we are not encouraging them. So we need to change our policy. And to that extent, I have said that, like NIFA, Northeast Frontier Agency, was under MEA for 10 years, when we built our administration right up to the McMahon line. We need to do something about the administrative structure. Take it out of the Home Ministry, because Home Ministry is a holding ministry. They are not interested in development as such. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Kaul. I see that Komodo Watson joined again. Maybe this time we'll have luck. Komodo Watson, let's try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank God. Sorry about that small technical glitch, and thanks for this opportunity. As a wonderful presentation, sir. And it traces the history of how we started off with Andaman Nicobar. I have served in those areas, and I have operated from Nicobar as well as Port Blair. And I think Navy has been doing fairly well, till we changed out the Tri-Service Command. And thereafter, the importance of Andaman Nicobar has only gone up, particularly with the context of what you brought out as the Malacca Dilemma. So, wherever there is some kind of a issue on the land border, we would be in a position to apply phenomenal amount of pressure, because something like 70-80% of the goods transit through the states of Malacca and Singapore. The other point that you brought out is extremely valid. We need to pursue this, which is about the Balaka Patrol, where the previous hesitation that there was for these four countries, the mixed countries I call them, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand, that perhaps is going back because of the increased aggressive posturing by China. And we used to take this now as an opportunity to join these patrols, because that would help us to monitor the entire area and apply pressure as may be required. There's also been talk about having the BrahMos batteries. You all have seen what happened in the case of the Moskva ship, which was hit by the Neptune missiles. And so obviously, if you have a BrahMos capable battery, which is stationed along some of the selected islands there, that would increase the threat potential for China. In the sense that we already pushed our boundaries, and these are on those islands which we can choose. They could even be uninhabited with just a handful of people, and that will immediately increase the range to 400 kilometers, and will put a lot of pressure on the surface navy of PLA, which is trying to come into the Indian Ocean. So on the container terminals, which you brought out about 75,000 crores, which is a Niti Aayog point, there are still a lot of questions in my assessment, in the sense that if you already have Sri Lanka as a transshipment hub, if you have Singapore, which is already well established, what more will it take for us to make it competitive? That is perhaps one question which I may pose you, because I'm sure a lot of ground studies have been done. It's been going on for 20 years plus. But how are we actually planning to make this more competitive, particularly when you have established transshipment hubs like Singapore, Hong Kong, and even Sri Lanka, which is also now getting another container terminal. So overall, I think there are good signs there. Recently, we also connected the high-speed internet which was lacking for so many years. We did not even have an internet. In fact, when I was in Port Blair just 3 years ago, and the only thing that was available, you would know, sir, is on BSNL, and the standard caption was "Bhai Saab nahi lagega," because you would never connect to anybody. So that was the problem. But thankfully, I think they did a great job in taking the submarine cables all the way to Port Blair, and that connectivity is there. So, because without this kind of a connectivity, you can't develop that port. So these I thought were some of the observations that I had, and thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Aditya ji and Dr. Sanat Kaul. The only response I request from him is on how are we actually trying to ensure that this transshipment hub in the Nicobar area becomes competitive. Thank you.
Dr. Kaul, please go ahead.
I didn't get the second part. No, I couldn't hear the second part. Something about Nicobar, you said.
Basically, say the transshipment hub which is there, the Niti Aayog has said that 75,000 crores will be spent. Now, how are we going to make this competitive in the backdrop of established transshipment hubs that are already available in Sri Lanka, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and other places? I know we can also establish contact with ASEAN, but the whole thing requires phenomenal amount of efforts, and I look at it happening maybe in something like 15 to 20 years for that to be competitive. So, what is the roadmap for making that competitive?
Well, I think the roadmap would be that they can start now because of the location with 100,000 ships going past. If you have a quality establishment in Great Nicobar, then obviously people will start coming to this place. Secondly, I don't know what's happening in Sri Lanka. So, is there going to be a decline of the ports or not? We don't know.
Okay. There are a couple of more questions. One is from Manish, and I think question has been answered, but again, I will read the question again. Did Andaman Nicobar Islands play any role in Second World War? Did British Navy or Japanese Navy use them? And yes, Dr. Kaul had spoken about it. Dr. Kaul, do you want to respond to that, please? He's having connectivity issue.
Yes. So the Japanese occupied these islands. The British left. There was no fighting. They surrendered and left. They were there for about three and a half or 3.25 years, and they used their occupation. Although they were rather cruel with the local people by making them work practically free, but they built two airstrips in Carnival, one in Port Blair. They fortified so many islands with cannons. They had, I'm told, hundreds of aircrafts in Carnival, oil and petrol dump. In Port Blair, they had submarines and ships. So they had no reason to leave the island, but they lost the war, so they left. Otherwise, they would have used these islands when they were losing by the land route to India. They would have used these islands to attack India. That's my view.
The next question is from Ankush Bhandari, and he's asking how these islands can be used for integrated theater command to more effectively. What needs to be done more on this? So, Dr. Sanat Kaul, you can take first stab, and then I'm going to request Commodore Vasan to also give comments on
This is
that
a very
question.
highly technical question in which Dr. Commodore Vasan will probably be able to give a much better and more enlightening answer. I think that the having formed I think there has been some repercussions, some ripples that Navy didn't like it, this, that, and the other. But I don't want to comment on that, and I think it's there. So if Commodore Vasan can give his views, it'll be even better. Thanks.
Commodore
Thank you,
Vasan.
sir. As far as the Tri-Services Command is concerned, I would say the very first experiment in unification started in Andaman Nicobar. Previously, it was the Fortan, it was the Fortress commander when you were there. And thereafter, already the complete mechanism for having the brigade, the amphibious brigade, which was operating from Trivandrum, which would come there and operate from there, the Air Force elements, which would operate from Nicobar, the naval aircraft, which operate from Port Blair, ships, and all that was already the template was available to us. And therefore, it became easier for us to move on to the Tri-Services Command, which also included the Coast Guard. We don't talk about the Coast Guard, but even now, the Coast Guard is also part of the entire structure which is there. So I think, any lessons that we have to draw in terms of a unified command would need to be drawn from Andaman Nicobar. When you're looking at a maritime theater command, we're looking at a strategic forces command, we're looking at any other command, because all the lessons are already here. And here we have people coming in rotation. You have a naval officer once, then you have an army officer, then you have a Air Force officer who's coming in command. Therefore, already each person has looked at his own vertical specialization of what more is required for making Andaman Nicobar meet the strategic and tactical demands of our country. So I'm quite happy that this would now be something that will help us in drawing out the format and refining them for other theater commands that are in mind. So it may take a little more time, but whatever lessons have to be drawn, in my assessment, should need to be drawn from Andaman Nicobar Command, which is already functional since 2001. That's 20 years. That's the kind of experience we have. So we should be happy that we have that experience, which should lead us to better things in formulating the procedures for other commands in India, which is a reality now.
Thank you very much indeed, Commodore Watson, for taking that question. Sunil B has a question. Please be very focused and specific. Don't give a lengthy monologue. Just specific question, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
No monologue. I just had a very brief question for Dr. Kaul. He mentioned the importance of Quad, and I'm just wondering, because it doesn't have any joint command as yet, does Andaman and Nicobar offer a good opportunity for India to, develop one of these places as a joint command for Quad?
Frankly, I think yes, Commodore Watson should be in a better position to say, but I think the Nankori Kamota harbor, which is fantastically good natural harbor, deep harbor, should be used for port purposes or some other purposes for the navies of the four countries. But that is just an off the cuff remark which I'm making. I think Commodore Watson may be in a better position to say.
I'll give the floor to Commodore Watson, please.
So, my view is very straightforward. Consistent with our strategic autonomy, which we've been pursuing, we do not want to start creating bases for, foreign navies. But we already have a provision for reciprocal arrangement, whether it is through the Limova or whether it is through the agreement that we have with Japan, UK, and other forces. Ideally, let them come to Port Blair, because that's what we will do if we go to the Eastern Pacific or Western Pacific. So we should not necessarily raise hackles by having a command there. So without that also, we are already doing all that which is there. We've had nuclear carriers coming into Chennai, and this is all on the reciprocal arrangement. I think will satisfy everybody, and without unnecessarily trying to raise the tension there in the Indo-Pacific area. So we are already doing this. Even Quad, they have clearly said that it's not a military alliance, though we know that it's to put pressure on China, but it's looking at vaccine diplomacy, it's looking at resilient supply chain initiative, it's looking at science and technology collaboration, it's looking at exchange of. So it's looking at a lot of other things which will be beneficial to us. So in my assessment, it may not be a wise thing to have some kind of a command, a quad command in Port Blair, when we can definitely do without it, with using the existing provisions of various other agreements that we have, reciprocal agreements, bilateral agreements with other people in the Pacific countries.
I think that's a very, very lucid and appropriate answer. Quad is not a military alliance, and India does not participate in military alliances per se. It does not mean that you don't have joint exercises, etc., etc. What happens 10, 20, 30, 40 years ahead, nobody can predict, nobody has a crystal ball. But as of now, Quad is not a military alliance, so let's not make case for our own strategic assets to be usurped by the Quad members for their own purposes. So that would be my editorial comment as the moderator and as president of CSA. That there are sensitivities on behalf of the government, And I think we should not be sort of, jumping the gun in that manner. I think it has been a very wonderful discussion. We try to bring domain experts, and there was no better domain expert than Dr. Sanat Kaul, who has worked as an administrator, as an Indian bureaucrat on more than 2 stints in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. He has written a book on it, and I would encourage, it's a 288-page book. It is available in PDF format. Uh, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, India's untapped strategic asset. So if anybody wants to know more in depth, I think there's a wealth of knowledge there. We are highly thankful to Dr. Sanat Kaul, and I cannot reinforce the view that for all good things we have sometimes to wait. And this lecture was scheduled for January, but he was in London, UK for some family issues. So we had to move it, but I'm very happy that we did visit this issue. We had a very productive discussion. I'm very thankful to our audience as well as our distinguished speaker who took time on a Saturday morning here and Saturday evening in India to participate in this great presentation. I also have to thank the team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori, Mr. Ankush Bhandari, and Mr. Rajiv Verma, who work behind the scenes to make these programs a success. With those comments, thanking everyone. We had a wonderful discussion. We hope to have more enriching discussions in future. Just for sake of information, our next program would be on May 14th, Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Daytime in US and 7:30 p.m. in India, Indian Standard Time, on political instability in Sri Lanka. We have a panel of 3 great experts who are going to do that discussion. So I invite all of you for that roundtable discussion. Till that time, namaskar, and thank you very much indeed for making this success.
Thank you. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you.